a time of revolt and death, of starvation and injustice. This is the French Revolution.
A revolution is a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. The French Revolution is a perfect example of a revolution because citizens dethrone their king and government in order to obtain a higher standard of living and establish a new leader.
Under King Louis XVI reign, the French economy collapsed due to his frivolous spending and the large investment on the American Revolution. The peasants were living in extreme poverty, and there was a great deal of tension amongst the lower class because of drought, disease, overpopulation, unemployment, poor harvest, shortages of food, and the rising cost of living. This led to unrest and riots that launched a revolution. Louis XVI's Controller General, Charles Alexandre de Calonne, proposed a financial reform package that included many taxes, such as a land tax. Food prices soared due to the taxes and famine, causing the urban population's situation to worsen.
The king spent the people's money on himself, living in luxury while his subjects starved. On May 5, 1789, at the Palace of Versailles, a meeting was held where the estates gave a list of their grievances to the king. The lower class wanted more representation in the government and established the National Assembly to gain more power. The frustrated people, led by extremist Jacobins, attacked the royal residence and arrested the king on August 10, 1792. A period of violence and revolt followed shortly after, and Parisian iconoclasts massacred hundreds of accused counter-revolutionaries.
Citizens of France were excited and panicked by the possibility of the loss of royal power. A group of them stormed the Bastille on July 4, 1789, to gather weapons. The Bastille was a symbol of the king's strength and power, so attacking the Bastille was a direct retaliation against the king for his mistreatment of the people. A new constitution that called for a constitutional monarchy was created on July 3, 1791, but radicals such as Robespierre and Desmoulins were unsatisfied. They envisioned a republican government and wanted an end to the monarchy for good.
Things quickly spiraled out of control, and France declared war on Austria in order to combat counter-revolutionary forces. Soon after, the National Convention replaced the Legislative Assembly and accused and murdered hundreds of suspected counter-revolutionaries. In 1793, the people condemned King Louis XVI and his queen Marie Antoinette to death. 10 months followed the king's execution. Thousands of people were beheaded at the guillotine for opposing the revolution. This was known as the Reign of Terror. It was a bloody and chaotic time. The Reign of Terror finally came to the end when Robespierre was executed on July 28, 1794.
A new constitution was drafted that called for a bicameral legislature, and Napoleon Bonaparte came to power as general of the French army. He eventually started a coup and rose to a higher power as the First Consul. This was the start of the Napoleonic era, and thus marking the end of the revolution.
The French Revolution was influenced by Enlightenment ideals like popular sovereignty and inalienable rights. The people wanted to redesign the government and abolish the absolute monarchy and the feudal system. The middle class was frustrated at how the king was managing, or not managing, the country, and was very angry because they didn't have the political power or representation to change that. There was a large gap between the rich and the poor, and the aristocracy was irresponsible.
Guided by the philosophies of Montesquieu, Rousseau, and Voltaire, the French revolutionaries valued freedom of speech, a representative government, and the separation of powers within that government. According to History Today, Montesquieu claimed that a liberal constitutional monarchy was the best system of government for a people who prized freedom, on the grounds that by dividing the sovereignty of the nation between several centers of power, it provided a permanent check on any one of them becoming despotic. Rousseau defined freedom as ruling oneself and as being unconstrained as long as it was being used legally. He believed a nation should be undivided, unlike Montesquieu, and sovereign over itself. His ideal government represented and provided equal opportunity for its people, gave the right of free speech, and was not an absolute power. Voltaire believed in enlightened absolutism, which, like Rousseau, kept the sovereignty of the state undivided, but believed it should remain in the hands of the monarch. He supported the freedom of speech and thought was against intolerance. The French peasants had these thoughts too, and their demands were not being met, so they revolted.
And now some fun facts. The Bastille is an alternative spelling of the word Bastide, which in French is for fortification. King Louis XVI's execution was voted for with a 361 to 288 rule. Over 18,000 people were beheaded at the guillotine during the Revolution. A new calendar and a new way to tell time were created during this period, though this system did not survive for very long. Before the Revolution, people had to work for an entire week just to afford a piece of bread because of inflation was so extreme. The size of the Palace of Versailles is 721,206 square feet. It is the largest royal palace in the world.